I'm giving this talk to a crowd of people who doesn't know me, and my work is very personal, so there's going to be some of the themes that I talk about which may be a little bit unusual for you to have heard in an open forum like this, but these are very important conversations for everybody. So, to start, I come from a reductive materialist background. I grew up with a family that didn't really believe in, well, I grew up with a father that didn't believe in anything beyond reductive materialism. He was very much in the Greek school. And so I always thought that this was a chaotic universe and we just happened to be somehow luckily on a rock near a star that supported life. And I was an atheist, and about 12 years ago now I started studying kinesiology, and despite the fact that this is a esoteric energy modality, I was coming at it with, from a very scientific perspective. I thought it was all muscles, bones and joints in the body, and I thought that all of the esoteric stuff that was attached to it was just woo and just some kind of placebo that I didn't understand. And so I began to open up during that time, but I was still very atheist. And I have a history of sexual trauma, which rendered me anorgasmic for many years, which means unable to achieve orgasm. And so that was most of my adult life. And started healing that with kinesiology, started healing that with a loving partner, but it was still a bit of a struggle. And then in 2019, on the eve of a departure to Ireland, I'd heard that psilocybin can help with anxiety and depression, and that's why I did it. We went out and got quite a lot. I didn't know about dosing at the time, and I took 7 grams of mushrooms, which is, they call it a warrior's dose. It's a lot. And I had 7 hours of hell, but that was bookended on either side with an experience with my husband that ended up in an orgasm, which was rare, very rare. And I have the weirdest psychic artifact of all time. It's very difficult to speak about, which is why I say this is the first time delivering this talk to an audience that doesn't know my backstory. I was able to have psychic and psychedelic orgasms daily. And it's been such a profound healing for me that this is now my life. It is an orgasmic life. And with these orgasms,
Amen.
Rise the divine thing. For a long time I didn't talk about this because we ended up in Ireland just as the pandemic started, and I was having these experiences that were blowing my mind, but I was passive in them because I did not know what was happening. I was going into black holes and out of white holes. I was going into the cells of my body. I was going into my atoms. I was going quantum. This continues to this day. I was meeting other entities. I was meeting other lives. I went into a life with my husband and I. We were living in England in different bodies, but it was still us. And so I started realizing that this is not just a reductive materialist world. There's something beyond it. And so I started to break open further and further. And one day in Ireland, the pandemic strikes. I'm a hardcore, I'd say, libertarian. I'm a bit of an anarchist. So my 4 horsemen of the apocalypse were out riding in the world: big pharma, big tech, big surveillance, big government. All of the things that I'd spent years railing against were suddenly evident in the world, and nobody could see them except me. I kept saying to everybody, I'm in a strange country, in a very compliant country where nobody asks questions. I mean, South Africans at least are belligerent, but the Irish were such good boys and girls. And so I lost touch with consensus reality. So my experience was not all love and light and roses. There was a lot of darkness, a lot of pain and a lot of trauma. I shook like a little dog for days, weeks or months at a time. I kept escaping my family because I couldn't bear to be in this weird Truman Show reality. And I would go into the forests of Ireland. The Irish were, you can go 2 kilometers now. Oh, now it's 8 kilometers, it's 10 kilometers. Oh, it's back to 2 kilometers. And I just walked that, and I didn't listen to any of their rules, and I would drive for 20 kilometers happily to go find old growth forest where I could actually just connect with the earth, and the mushrooms started to speak through me again. And I spent a memorable day lying on my side looking at a tiny little coral fungus. Now there are no other mushrooms in my life, this is completely straight. Lying on my side looking at a coral fungus an inch high, and that coral fungus took me into the earth, into the mantle of the earth, and took me around to the crust of South Africa and brought me up into the botanical gardens in Emmerich Dam, which had been my favorite place in Johannesburg. and the goddess found me. And so the first goddess that found me is Medusa. She's over there. And she was the first one that emerged out of my pencil. We'd been homeschooling, and the school had been sending absolute rubbish home for us to do. And my son was 8 and he wasn't interested in it, so we did Greek mythology instead. And so we did the story of Medusa. But for the first time I read Medusa after the time of Me Too, and I thought, well, this is a very familiar story. Medusa's our first Me Too. So Medusa was cursed. She became this Gorgon who hated men and wanted to turn everybody to stone. But it wasn't a curse. You know, she was raped by Poseidon in Athena's temple. There was nowhere she could go that she was safe. So finally she had a weapon. But she didn't take that weapon into the town square and kill every man she saw. She went to a little island with her sisters. And men would come, these heroes would come to kill her, these amazing heroes, and she'd turn them to stone. And so I saw her with her third eye open and her earthly eyes closed, so her weapons put away. And I called her the goddess of the loving eye, and she looks at us and at each other, and for us to look at each other with eyes of love. So she was the first goddess that emerged, and after that they started coming fast and furious. So my background as a kinesiologist means that I'm very well versed in the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, because that's the basis of kinesiology: wood, fire, earth, metal, water. But I was also working in the 4 elements with a group of women doing goddess looms. Sorry, they weren't called, women's dream weaving looms. And so we were working in the 4 elements. And I would draw these goddesses and realize that they were elemental. And there were 5 elements, but there were also 4 elements. And so there was this strange tension between the 2 things, one being very knowable and one being very unknowable to me. For me, this is the beautiful part, because the goddess is always about the yin. The divine feminine is very much about yin. Yin is the dark aspect of the Taiji Tu, or the yin yang. Yin is female, yin is dark, deep, mysterious, unknowable, and it enfolds in perpetuity like a Mandelbrot fractal. Yang is the opposite. Yang is light, it's white, it's male, it expands, it grows. And for me, this aspect of divine femininity is what is missing in the world. It's a materialism. The divine feminine is about the body. And it's very much about the body, because every single person here came out of a womb, came out of a vagina, but probably didn't come out of an orgasm, because we celebrate the male orgasm because that's the biological imperative for reproduction. So the world is built around the male orgasm, about male sexual pleasure, about male sexuality. But the female is expected to just reproduce and get on with it. And so the goddesses, while they were coming out, were explaining this to me. But I was still too uncomfortable to talk about her story. So I would go to publishers and they'd go, yeah, this is great. Can you get rid of this? Can you get rid of that? I never wanted to touch my book. It was perfect. Oh, and in the making of the book, once the goddesses had emerged, and I knew it was time to write it, it was quite mathematical. You know, I'd have to sit and I'm not a mathematical person in the slightest, but I had an orgasm, and then I had to download all night where I dreamed the goddess, dreamed the structure of the book, and I got up and in 15 minutes I'd mapped it out and I started writing, and the book, which is a 260-page book, came out in 2 weeks as though I was remembering it. I did not create this. They came through me, not of me. And this is true of all creativity. We are channels for creativity. We are not necessarily, well, we are all the creators, but we channel this. And so I wrote these goddesses, tried to find a publisher, had to work with them because all the publishers wanted me to edit the book, and she was just saying, no, you can't edit. But I also got more and more comfortable as I was writing, as I was speaking about the goddesses, to start speaking about the orgasmic aspects of it and the divine sexuality within it. Because I posit, and so do the goddesses, that if we live in a world where female sexual pleasure is as important and as prioritized as male sexual pleasure, imagine the healing that will create. Every woman here knows that the best way to have an orgasm is with a loving partner who listens to you, who you feel safe with, who is a partner, a kind person, somebody you can absolutely trust and let go with. And if you could build a family with a person like that, can you imagine if most of the children born into this world were born of 2 orgasms instead of 1? So the orgasmic story was part of it, and as I started speaking about it, I got a publisher. And that showed me that the more I open up to this, the more it will open up for me. And I've had the most incredible experiences since speaking about this. People who'll sit through one of my talks and not say a word and then phone me the next day for 2 hours because they've got so much to talk about. Because we need to really start talking about the fact that women are not just as important as men. We really have to prioritize women if we want to come into a time of equality and kindness. And so these goddesses are part of that. And then in 2023, I found a publisher, and they're out. I've got some decks if anybody's interested. And so in 2023, I had another experience which was very profound and upsetting for me. I thought I'd been poisoned by a mushroom. I'd been foraging for mushrooms, so culinary mushrooms. I'm not a big mushroom person that goes out getting high all the time at all, but I love eating culinary mushrooms, and I'd gone on a forage, and I'd gotten very, very sick afterwards. So the people in the mushroom group said, do the safe thing. I went to the hospital to say, listen, can you just take my bloods? I don't think I've eaten a poisonous mushroom. But they, of course, being hospitals, put me on 2 drips, told me I was going to die. And for 3 days, I lay in that hospital bed thinking I was going to die because they kept telling me I was going to die with 2 drips in. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, because I did not sleep for those 3 days, I was walking around with my drip stand and all my drips pacing up and down, and the goddess came to me in my own voice. She's over there. There she is. Blaze, my goddess, said to me, if you stay here, you will die. It was as loud as that, in my own voice. And I walked up to the nurse's station and I said, get these things out of my hands. And they didn't want to, but they did. They unhooked the drips. I had to wait till 7 o'clock in the morning for the doctor because they didn't want to release me without the doctor's say so. I'd driven myself to the hospital because he hadn't been around for it, and I had my bags on my shoulders waiting for the doctor to say so. I got a phone call from the doctor to finally say, oh, we've done your tests, you're not going to die, you have salmonella. I said, thank you very much, grabbed my bags and walked myself out of the hospital. And I was desperate and desolate, and I thought, how can I be a kinesiology? I was even a kinesiology teacher. One of my beautiful students has come to see me today. I was teaching kinesiology. How could I have so little trust in the science and the medicine that have helped me for so long that I let myself be at the mercy of the machine again? And I was despondent and very low. And then the goddess found me one more time. Well, not one more time. She keeps finding me. She said, go and run yourself a bath. And I did this bizarre ritual. I've never done anything like this before. I lit certain candles. I went and found very specific oils from doTERRA, beautiful, very pure oils, which I use. I only use the purest of the pure things for any of my rituals. Put them in the bath. I did a whole process over it, and I got in the bath. Now, I had been trained in the 5 elements. My entire practice was in the 5 elements. I taught in the 5 elements. I was obsessed with the 5 elements. I'd written a book about it. I'd written a goddess card, the goddess cards. But I got in the water, and I had a chakra popping kundalini experience where I learned exactly what the chakras were in. I don't even know how long I was in there for, but I had the most amazing experience of absolute, again, oneness with self, but it was different. It was a different experience. It was a kundalini rising experience. And I got out of the bath and I drew second from the top, second from the left. I drew that goddess floating in space. I didn't know that she was the first of a series. I thought she was just going to be the goddess that was about chakras. Yeah. But then they kept coming and kept coming. And what was interesting is they weren't coming out of orgasms anymore. The orgasms were still happening, and they're still happening. Thank you, goddess. But the experiences were now able to be consciously channeled. I was able to actually do all kinds of rituals to bring on this psychic experience to open my third eye. And there are 49 goddesses. Again, the downloads that I have with these things are so insane that it feels, I have physics downloads. I've had to speak to mathematicians. Amanda Gifford, my darling friend, introduced me to William Brown, and we did an interview with him. He's a astrophysicist. What is he? He's everything. He's a famous physicist. He's Nassim Haramein's partner. And I had to speak to, and he said, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And he told me what was happening for me in my psychic visions that I have about the yin and the yang. So for me, that's what it comes down to. Polarity, the yin and the yang, darkness and light. Everything is in this binary. Everything in this world is in this binary of dark and light. And the pearls within the Taiji Chu, the pearls within the yin and the yang, is quantum entanglement. Because if it was completely dark, it would collapse into nothingness. And if it was completely light, it would explode into light. And neither of those things would exist without the quantum tunneling of those pearls in the Taiji Chu that form material reality. And so I see this now, the Taiji Chu, the yin and the yang, as a model at scale for everything, for the universe itself, for black holes. And we are perpetually in the event horizon. There is no time, there is no space. We're frozen photons, somehow existing as matter. In the event horizon, everything is happening right now. So the second set of goddesses downloaded to me, and they work a little bit differently to any other chakra work that you've done before, because what normally happens with chakra work, because now in the last 3 years I've started studying it more, most people when they work with chakras will say, well, there's a blockage at heart. So you either have a problem at solar plexus or you have a problem at throat, and that's what they'll work on. They'll work on those 3 chakras. These goddesses will say, right, you're having a problem at third eye, but it's actually manifesting at sacrum. And so there's a goddess of third eye to sacrum. There's also a goddess of sacrum to third eye, because the conversations and the channels will be different. The yin comes down and the yang goes up. What comes up must come down. And so the divine feminine again becomes the vessel for embodiment. Again, we all came out of a womb. We haven't managed to create artificial wombs yet, and I hope we never will. But we all came out of a womb. We all came out of a womb because we're supposed to be an immortal and limitless soul, having a mortal and limited experience in a body. And it can't just be about enlightenment. So it would be, if we lived in a world where we could all be monks on a mountain, meditating forever, that would be a great world. But what would get done? Would there be any children? Would there be any reincarnation? None of that would happen. We have to experience what it is to be embodied before we can fully become enlightened. And that's what the goddesses have taught me. So, if you have any questions.